You're listening to Season 2 of Beyond Insights, your go-to podcast for all things accounting, business, and technology.
Unsure how to improve your leadership skills, or whether you're suited to being a leader to begin with? Looking for ways to build a stronger team or take better risks? Then stay tuned.
From cybersecurity, blockchain, and AI innovations to sustainability, employee retention, and work-life balance, we've got you covered.
We speak to knowledgeable and insightful guests from varied backgrounds, industries, and locations from all around the globe.
From this multiplicity of thought, we strive to find solutions to our most urgent business problems.
Whether you're a small business owner, an accountant, entrepreneur, or even a young professional looking to progress, this podcast is for you.
Thank you for tuning in. Let's dive right in and go beyond insights.
Hello everyone and welcome to Beyond Insights. Entrepreneurs constantly navigate a landscape of highs, lows and evolving regulations. In this episode, I'll be joined by Xero's Managing Director of the UK and Emerging Markets, Alex von Schirmeister, to discuss the realities of running a business today and strategies for guiding those who are slower to embrace digital transformation. So tune in for insights into the challenges facing small businesses, the growing need for trusted advisors, and the crucial role accountants and bookkeepers play in helping businesses not just stay afloat, but succeed. So thank you so much. I did mess up your surname, even though I practiced it. Thanks for joining us and welcome. You spent more than 25 years working across a number of different industries and continents. How has your time working in these different roles changed the way that you think about business? And maybe, just give us a bit of background into who you are and, how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, happy to. And as you introduced me, Jodilee, I'm Alex, and I'm the Managing Director for Xero in the UK and emerging markets. And I've been at Xero for 3.5 years, but prior to Xero, I was in a fintech which served small and medium businesses. And before that, I did a digital transformation, which also kind of sold to small businesses. Before that, I was at eBay, which is a marketplace where a lot of small businesses sell on. So in various capacities, I've been lucky enough to either be exposed to or sell directly and kind of market to small businesses in different countries. And it's interesting. It has really evolved and it hasn't over the last 25 years, right? At the end of the day, kind of the fundamental of a small business is still, at some point, right? The founder, she or her, has a great idea that they're passionate about, and they think about a business they want to start. And oftentimes they don't think of it necessarily as a business. They want to pursue the passion they're passionate about, and then building the business around it comes as part of that. And then kind of you're off to the races, right? And God, it's that the commitment of starting a business is like a commitment for a super, super, super rewarding, but also really hard journey. Obviously, over 25 years, where have some of the changes been? Probably the most important one is technology, access to technology and tools, payment landscapes. Obviously, the fact that we're even doing a podcast now from 2 remote locations. I mean, it's ridiculous the pace at which technology has evolved. And that has not only impacted existing businesses from 25 years ago, but it has allowed businesses to now exist that couldn't have existed 25 years ago. And then the other big change or difference I see is mostly around regulations and the extent to which different markets embrace the kind of entrepreneurship in the country and establish a regulatory environment or a financing environment that allows small businesses to blossom. And that's definitely something where I think countries and kind of the politicians in different countries have learned about, and you see that landscape shifting all the time.
Amazing. I think it's, at the end of the day, as you say, it's about people who are wanting to kind of follow their passion and kind of build a business around it. So it sounds like you also have very international experience, and I think you touched on that. Do you think that there are different challenges in different areas, and does that international experience give you a unique perspective on those business challenges?
For sure. I mean, I think the biggest challenge in the area, as I've seen from different kind of international markets, is first of all the size of the market. But look, I'll give you a very tangible example from many years ago when I was working for eBay. There are a lot of eBay Spanish sellers that want to sell their items, but at the time, just because of internet penetration, there weren't enough buyers to buy them. And so the supply demand in that market was completely off compared to, say, the UK, where internet penetration was more established. And one of the things we did at the time as a platform was we helped those Spanish listings of the Spanish sellers be translated, made available in English, and made available kind of for international shipping, so that you could open up Spanish commerce to other markets, right? So that's a clear difference. I think the other one I alluded to is different countries have either more generous or less generous politics when it comes to helping small businesses. There are, I look to Scandinavia, for example, where the amount of grants and kind of tax benefits and the availability of incubators, etc. There's an entire ecosystem which is almost inviting entrepreneurs to kind of come and start their own businesses and helping them for those first critical few years, where there's other markets where that is definitely not available, and it just makes entrepreneurship much more difficult.
No, for sure. I can definitely, I've also seen that in different regions. Makes a lot of sense. So what led you to be interested in small businesses in particular?
It was accidental, right? I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to go do small businesses. I think it was when I realized my first real pure technology job was at eBay. And when eBay built itself as a platform, initially for collectors, right? You had kind of C2C or customer to customer transactions. It was entrepreneurs who discovered that the platform was actually a really good idea to set up a business and build a business. And so almost unwillingly, we discovered that this platform was a very, very, very attractive marketplace platform for people to build businesses on. And once we then realized that and started honing in on these businesses and understanding what they needed, how we could create the platform that was friendlier for their needs, we started building the product accordingly. I just kind of discovered this whole universe that I'd never even thought of, which is entrepreneurs constantly looking for inspirations and new ideas to build a business. And once you kind of discover this small business environment, it's hard not to fall in love with it, right? It's kind of the heroics of those small business owners are quite endearing. So.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I started out in audit, and all you see is big corporates. And then when I joined Sift as well, it was like all of a sudden there's these kind of people out there against all odds building these incredible businesses. So I definitely get that sentiment. I suppose just a few more questions on your background. If you look back at your career, what were kind of the defining moments that shaped the way that you think about leadership and business?
One of the defining moments would have been international postings, right? And sometimes I applied for a job and I moved country. Sometimes a company sent me to another country. But ultimately, I think part of my leadership journey has been forcing myself to rewire for different cultural environments, different corporate environments, different corporate cultures, and learning how to adjust to that. And I definitely feel that has, it's been a huge gift in kind of the way I've grown and developed. The second one, I hate to say it, is hardship. You learn more in the hard years than in the good years, right? It's like they say, a good sailor is the one that knows how to sail a sailboat when there's no wind and not when. Like, I've been through the great financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Which meant I had to go through situations where the company I was at had to go through layoffs. I've been in organizational kind of redesign environments, and oftentimes the way you deal with difficult moments and the way you deal with challenges and hopefully the way you overcome those challenges, those are the biggest learning opportunities. And so certainly as a leader, that's when I learned the most.
Amazing. Such great insights for up and coming leaders. So I think before we kind of go more into small business, because I know you also, have already mentioned it, but are passionate about that. What excites you most about working with small businesses?
I think it's just the the diversity of their journeys and just the stories, right? And Jolie, you were kind of talking about, when you were in audit in larger enterprises, like I kind of feel the enterprise stories oftentimes, there's pattern recognition there, and they all ultimately sound a bit the same. Now, by the way, they may have started as small businesses at
For
some,
sure.
but once you're in, but when you go to small businesses and you talk to founders, like every story is different, and every story is born of, it's kind of a different passion or a different trigger, and and even just last week I was at a conference and I was talking to entrepreneurs. These were like serial entrepreneurs, and they were often telling about how their first 4 or 5 ventures, failed and collapsed, and then how they were homeless, or how their house was kind of foresold, and like horrifying stories, by the way. And yet somehow they found the fortitude to keep plowing ahead. Eventually found the right business and build a business, a successful business. And when I'm sitting there and I'm listening to those stories, I'm like, how can you not fall in love with just diversity and the grit and the resilience and kind of the really cool stories that come out of a small business environment?
No, that's amazing. It's so inspiring to kind of, whatever challenges you have in your own life to kind of, overcome and innovate in the way that they must have done in order to kind of get to that success story.
Right.
So I think, as you mentioned, there's lots of challenges for small businesses. What do you think of all the challenges that they face today? What do you think is the most overlooked challenge to small businesses?
I think the one that I hear spoken about the least is loneliness. And oftentimes small businesses they're not alone. They're surrounded by people, but it's lonely. You're accountable to you and yourself only, right? And oftentimes you may not want to share all your ups and downs with everybody, and especially not the people that care about you, right? So you may almost kind of at times suffer in silence and at times celebrate in silence, but it gets lonely. And I think when I speak to small businesses that have been successful or are successful, one of the variables that I often hear is they surrounded themselves with a network of people that helped them. And it's not only help because they provided them a tool or a process or a supplier, but they even just helped them to emotionally be less lonely.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And cool to hear about those networks. I think there are a lot of other people out there that you can reach out to. So really cool. Are there any common mistakes you see small business owners making when trying to navigate the challenges? I mean, this loneliness, but all the other challenges as they grow their business.
Yeah, I think, look, one of the obvious one is underinvesting in the things that matter early. Right, oftentimes the the difference a good hire can make, right? Just hiring that first other employee to take some of the load off of you and accelerate the business. And I get it, right? That's a super, super, super difficult decision to make because it means you're committing to the salary of another person. It's obviously an expense, but it comes with the responsibility of I'm no longer accountable for my own success or failure. I'm now kind of bringing someone in with me, and that's a really hard decision to make. But more often than not, when I see businesses doing that at the right time, it accelerates them. Needless to say, I mean, I'm in the technology sector. I would say choosing your right technology stack for what you need at the right time can be a game changer. And we have plenty of examples of businesses that do that. I alluded to the loneliness part. So basically the way that plays out is just talk to others, learn from others, go and mingle and go and network and find out how others solve the problems that you think are the first time you're encountering them, but hundreds of others have already kind of gone through.
That makes sense. Some really good tips there. With AI, which is all the big buzzword at the moment, and automation on the rise, do you see new challenges for small businesses in the next few years with kind of this big shift?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge in the short term is God, I mean, it could be the biggest time waster in the world, right? You could spend 24 hours a day playing around with AI, and yes, it's fascinating. Yes, there's great stuff out there, and by all means, you shouldn't ignore it, right? I do think people need to get comfortable with the fact that the world is changing fast and will change with AI, but you shouldn't do that at the expense of focusing on what is your business, who is your customer, what are you trying to do, and so. I think AI is incredibly exciting. Obviously, everybody's investing in it. But my kind of one watch out is it will not be the end all and all of everything else, right? You're still trying to run a business based on what you were passionate about.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think when the hype, well, at least first started, when I noticed that everyone was adding AI to their business or to their app or to whatever, but I couldn't always see the substance in what they were adding. It was kind of, they were adding it so they could have it. And I think as a business owner, it's easy to be like, oh, this tool has AI, but is that AI actually adding value to me? You know, and I think that's what you're touching on. It's kind of like make sure that it helps you run your business, which is your passion. So no, that's really great. I think that leads nicely into my next question. What are some of the biggest misconceptions business owners have about digital tools?
I think the biggest misconception is the fact that the digital tools will be a drag on their time, or that they're very, very difficult to implement. Look, I get it, right? The most precious commodity of any business owner is time.
For sure.
Time. I'm too busy. I don't have time. And kind of getting your mind around a new technology or learning a new technology or a new process takes time. And so there's just a natural inertia in, I just want to keep the thing, I want to keep everything the way it is. I don't want to make any changes. I don't have time to make any changes. My favorite quote is, the 7 most expensive words in business are, we have always done it this way, right? Because when you have always done it this way, it means you're not willing to change. You're not willing to disrupt your way of doing the business. You're not willing to disrupt yourself or your processes. Well, guess who is your competitor next door? Right? Someone somewhere is coming up with a new way of doing what you're doing. And so if you're not continuously challenging yourself, someone else will. And I think so the misconception of technology is, yes, of course, you need to invest some time in kind of learning technology and adapting it. But the potential gain on time that you get afterwards, the potential gain on efficiencies you get after that, the potential gain on reach of customers, etc., can be a real needle mover. And so I would always tell small businesses, do spend some time picking your right technology. It can be a game changer.
No, 100%. I can resonate with that. When I was in audit, we used to spend hours auditing. And from when I started to when I left, this one task used to take us, I think, 3 weeks to do. And by the time I left, it took us 7 minutes because we'd used automations. But, in the beginning, it felt like, no, we don't have the time to build the automations. And so for the next few years, we kind of did the same thing. But yeah, so it's really kind of making that time to implement the tools and putting that investment so that you can grow in the future. I think really, really good shout there. Cool. So are there any specific technologies that you think small businesses should prioritize first? There's obviously tons of tech and tools out there, but what kind of should be a small business's first thing to look at?
Yeah. And look, the reality is a lot of small businesses prioritize the technology without even realizing they've done it, right? One of the first things you probably do as a small business is pick who your mobile data provider is going to be, right? Or who's going to provide you your internet connection, or who you're going to be banking with. And more often than not, that bank nowadays means who does your online banking. So they're kind of, I would say, basic technology choices most people probably don't even think of as a technology choice. Depending on what your activity is or your sector, right? You're likely to be looking at what is my distribution, right? So for example, if you're an e-commerce company, well, one of the first things you think about is, what e-commerce platform will I use to build my website on? If you're in a kind of e-content business, you're probably going to think about, well, where am I going to host my content, and which video editing software will I use to film it, right? So those are kind of very obvious questions, because you couldn't even start your business if you didn't think of those elements. And then you probably want to take payment. So very quickly, you're going to be faced with what payment methodologies will I offer, right? What sort of fintech do I need? And then look, I'm going to have to toot our own horn and say, where does Xero come in? There's only so long you can run your business without actually knowing how your business is going. And that means you need to know your numbers. You need to know what's coming in and what's going out. You need to know whether your cash flow is positive, whether you can meet your payments or not, right? And that comes down to make sure you equip yourself with the right software to have your bookkeeping in order, have your numbers in order, facilitate your compliance in your tax returns. If you start hiring people, your payroll, it just takes a whole lot of pain away if you get that sorted early.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think kind of running the business is one thing, but as soon as you want to start growing the business, you need to have that data to make the right decisions and keep track of things. So makes a lot of sense. I think then next one is you've spoken a lot about technology now and how it's important for business. Do you have any examples of small businesses that you've interacted with that have embraced technology and how it's actually impacted their business?
Yeah, lots, right? I mean, I was just at an event in the UK recently with a whole bunch of small businesses, and I'm trying to think of. There's a business called Spice Kitchen, for example, right? They basically create spice kits and then sell those spices to different businesses. As you may imagine, very quickly it's, how do I actually sell these, or how do I distribute them? So they embraced Shopify as an e-commerce platform. And then very quickly they went to Xero, and kind of they credit this Shopify Xero combination as being the technology that just allows them to run their business. And then obviously equally they kind of hired people, and so it's a people business. There was another business, fascinating business, and just because you were talking about AI earlier, called Capda, which is basically it's a clothing sorting and recycling technology, and so the way they explained their business to me is a lot of people hand in clothing, but you don't know if it's cotton or polyester or wool, and depending on what it is, it needs to be treated differently, and sorting that is quite difficult. They've created a technology which sorts that automatically through AI, which then means the utilization of that recycled clothing is much, much better. It's more cost efficient, etc. And again, right, that's a technology investment. They drive around this truck with this sorting it's like a big sorting robot, and they drive it around to the different cities and councils to do that in. And again, they're a Xero customer, and they use us to then basically run the business in the background. But it almost doesn't matter who you talk to. Everybody will have what we call an app stack, right? They will have surrounded themselves with a handful, sometimes 5, sometimes 15 different applications which allow them to run different parts of the business, right? If they want more sophisticated reporting, right, they may have obviously adopted Sift. If they need, kind of inventory management, they may have adopted kind of an inventory management software. But ultimately, depending on what the business is, they do need to surround themselves with the right technology to run that business.
That makes sense. I think it's empowering those decisions to grow again and really make it easier to run your business. Another important part of a business, I might be biased in this question, but is an accountant or bookkeeper, because I'm an accountant. So how can an accountant or bookkeeper help small businesses, and why should every small business consider working with one?
Every time I meet a small business that doesn't have an accountant bookkeeper, and to be fair, there's fewer and fewer of them, I just go like, how in the world do you do that, right? And especially when you think about like during COVID, and obviously there were a lot of special regulations around furloughs, and I mean, like, I was a small business. You would have needed a PhD to navigate the complexity of the accounting rules that came with managing furloughs in COVID, right? When you look at the recent budget changes in the UK, and I'm picking on the UK, but this is the case in any other country, when there are kind of national insurance changes or tax rate changes, or it is a very, 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 very complex thing to do. And again, if your focus as a business owner is to pursue the business of the passion that you're passionate about, why do you want to waste time trying to figure out the oftentimes very technical and very complex nature of the bookkeeping and the compliance and making sure you have your taxes in order? The second thing I'd say, and I know one of our accountant bookkeepers makes this point quite regularly, is a lot of people that start businesses were oftentimes employees beforehand. And so they have the natural instincts of an employee. And the natural instinct of an employee is, I get my payroll at the end of the month, it's already been netted out, which means that cash is all mine and I can now spend it. Whereas as a small business, the very first instinct you should have is, I may need to put some of that aside for future VAT bills, for example. And so, again, an accountant bookkeeper can just help give you the discipline and the order and the ways of working to make sure that you do not fall foul of cash flow problems, unpaid invoices, and suddenly you're kind of chasing payments that are due to you, or even worse, an actual compliance problem where you miss a filing or you misfile the tax.
No, agreed. I can resonate again with that because, you started a business, making cupcakes. I always use that. Our demo entities that because you love making cupcakes and you're a baker. You didn't want to be an accountant or a tax person. And so, all the time you spend figuring that out, you could be inventing the new best cupcake, and it's kind of like focus on what you're passionate about and what you're good at, and get the right people to help you. So I think, yeah, super important.
That's a great example. That's exactly what I meant. Yeah, correct.
And so now that hopefully small businesses know it's important to have an accountant or bookkeeper, what should they look for when choosing one?
Look, chemistry is going to be very important just because that accountant bookkeeper is not just your accountant bookkeeper. They ultimately, if they're good and if they're kind of more of an advisor, they'll become your business coaches, right? They will have a pretty intimate understanding of your business and how well it's going or how much you're struggling. And so working with someone that you can build that trusting relationship with is going to be important. First of all. Second of all is, I talked about loneliness earlier. I would talk to others and make sure that you're choosing an accountant bookkeeper that other people have recommended to you, and again, that you feel based on your peers and based on your network has a good reputation. And then I would look at technology as well, right? The accountant and bookkeeper to some extent is your chief digital transformation officer. They will help you digitalize your business because they will recommend to you which digital tools they see with other customers, right? They have the benefit of pattern recognition. They can say, well, wait a minute, I have 200 other retail customers and they're all using this, and maybe you should think about using this. And so, but in order to do that, you probably want to choose an accountant bookkeeper who is relatively digitally savvy himself or herself so that they can actually help you with that.
Makes sense. And I suppose linked to that digital kind of transformation, how has the role of accountants and bookkeepers changed in recent years?
I mean, massively, right? First of all, forget for a second about the digital transformation of the small businesses they serve. They themselves have, like the day of the kind of filing cabinet with 200 boxes of last year's accounts is over, right? That everything has been digitalized. And when you think about even the way you run your practice, the way as a practice you are managing your book of clients and your proposals and your billing, all of that is automated nowadays. And so it's clear that the fundamental accounting principles of a bookkeeper or an accountant haven't changed, but the way you're applying them is completely different. Now, the beauty of that is it I think also allows accountant bookkeepers today to, because they're spending less work on repetitive kind of menial tasks, they can now spend that work on either serving more customers, right? They can grow their business because they now have that spare capacity, or they can move up market by offering kind of higher value add advisory services rather than kind of just the bookkeeping services. And we see many of the ABs doing exactly that.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely where we also work with a lot of accountants, and they've kind of done all this automation, but how can they partner with their clients more? How can they, help those businesses grow with all the decisions that they need to make based on the information they have? So I think it's an exciting time to be an accountant based on what you're saying, because no one actually likes doing, well, very few people like doing repetitive menial tasks, and it's cool to be part of those small businesses' growth. So very cool. last two questions before we go to rapid fire. With automation and AI becoming more prevalent, how do you really see the future of, accounting and bookkeeping evolving? Like, how is AI really going to impact the way that accountants operate?
Look, there's no question again that AI has a huge potential to just automate repetitive tasks. And by the way, it's not new, right? We've been using AI for a few years already. When you look at some of the advanced analytics, that we offer to our customers, they are AI powered. When you think about the access to just a vast array and library of content and how you kind of sort through that content to give anyone the most relevant, well, that's AI powered. But increasingly, when I look at the way we're applying it at Xero, it's very much around, again, right to my point earlier on, let's not get kind of completely lost in this AI thing, is how do you bring about tangible benefits that are actually going to change your life tomorrow rather than boiling the ocean? So for example, one of the tasks many small businesses spend doing is, oh my God, how many invoices are still outstanding? Who hasn't paid my invoice? Out of the people that haven't paid it, are they late? Are they on time? Well, that's a relatively easy AI query to say, can you just tell me how many invoices are outstanding? Yes, so many. Can you tell me how many of those are late? Yes, so many. Can you please send a reminder? Right? Those are relatively easy AI prompts, and it will make a world of a difference. So increasingly, you will see artificial intelligence, and we will do that at Xero with kind of our JAX tool, right? Our Just Ask Xero tool, is bring very, very concrete and very tangible AI prompts that allow you to improve a particular process that currently is consuming too much of your time.
No, amazing. I like the angle on, what tasks or things am I struggling with and how can AI help that, like a targeted approach. And I think then comes back down to freeing up all that time for accountants and bookkeepers. So what would your advice be for accountants and bookkeepers who want to better support these exciting small businesses we've been chatting about?
The advice for accountant and bookkeepers?
Yes.
Look, I mean, again, it's such a fast evolving world, and I'm convinced, especially with AI, we will see more innovation in the next 3 years than the last 15 years combined. And so the only thing I can say to accountant bookkeepers is be in continuous learning mode. Right? Certainly speak to your Xero account manager or senior account manager and make sure that you know everything that's coming out. We are investing very heavily in kind of our product and technology roadmap and coming out with new features, functionality, but so is the industry, right? So there obviously, I know you're here for a digital accountancy show later this week, and obviously we will be there. There are other industry events. We do our own kind of Xero roadshows or Xero kind of Xero cons. It is worth staying on top of that just because the rapid pace at which innovation is hitting the market.
No, that's a really good tip. And I think from some of the other stuff you've said as well, it's kind of like no longer just be an accountant that, does the books, but kind of use all this technology to really help those small businesses as well, which is great.
Correct.
Cool. So I have some rapid fire questions for you. It's kind of a tradition we do at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to give you 4 quick questions and you've got to give me your quickest answer. What is one piece of software besides Sift or Xero that you can't live without?
Most recently, ChatGPT.
Okay, cool. That's a good
I
one.
love playing around with it for anything from menus to travel itineraries.
Oh, yeah, it's great for travel, especially since I've been touring lately. Number 2, what's the best book you've read recently, and the best podcast you've listened to, besides Beyond Insights, obviously?
You know what? I read so much for work all week long. I actually try to read fiction every now and then. So the best fiction book I read recently is All the Colors of the Dark. I love that book. The best kind of business or self-help book I read recently, probably Atomic Habits. I know that sounds like kind of motherhood and apple pie. It's been around for a while, but yeah, it's probably the best one I read. I was like, oh, I can actually apply some of that. Best podcast, there are a lot of good podcasts there. Probably one I refer to quite regularly, I just like, is Diary of a CEO. I just love learning from the different people that speak on kind of Steve Bartlett's podcast.
Amazing. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned about building a business?
I'll probably go back to the loneliness point earlier. Just don't be lonely. Speak to others, build your networks, reach out to others. Don't be shy about asking for help when you need help. Don't be shy about admitting that it's hard at times. That's okay. And equally enjoy the successes when they come.
Amazing. And last question, if there's one thing you want listeners to take away from today's podcast, what would it be?
Probably the fact that we are living in a very, very, very rapid changing world. And I'll probably just come back to the quote from earlier, right? Is that we have always done it this way. Don't disrupt yourself. Challenge yourself to do it differently. Challenge yourself every morning, like, is there a better way or a different way to do this? And just keep innovating and renovating yourself as a person, and then your business obviously as well. Amazing. Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us and for all the insights. I learned a lot. I really think our listeners also get a lot of value. So thanks for taking the time, and thanks to all the listeners for listening, and we'll hopefully see them on the next one. Cool. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Jodilee. Thanks. Cool. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Insights podcast.
Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to right now.
And please share with any of your colleagues or friends or family members that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast.
That's all from us. Until next time, see you then.